They say the truth has a way of finding you. It doesn't care how long you've been running from it. It doesn't care how comfortable your life is. It doesn't care about the house you built, the name you gave, the tears you cried at every school play, every scraped knee, every nightmare at 2 a.m. The truth is patient. It waits. And on an ordinary Tuesday morning, when I was standing in my kitchen making coffee, mine arrived in a white envelope. It had the logo of a laboratory on the top left corner, my name typed neatly on the front, and inside was a single page that unraveled 12 years of my life in 4 words. My name is Daniel, and this is everything that happened. I need you to understand something before I go any further. I need you to understand that I loved her. I truly, completely, devastatingly loved her. Her name was Michelle. I met her when I was 26 years old at a mutual friend's birthday dinner. She laughed at something someone said across the table, and I remember thinking, I want to be around that laugh for the rest of my life. We dated for 2 years. She was smart. She was funny. She had this way of listening to you that made you feel like the most important person in the room. I was completely gone for her. I proposed on a beach in North Carolina. She said yes before I even finished the sentence. We got married in September. It was 72 degrees. The sky was this impossible blue, and I stood at the altar and genuinely believed I was the luckiest man alive. Looking back now, I wonder if I was already wrong about everything. Michelle got pregnant 6 months after the wedding. We hadn't been trying exactly, but we weren't not trying either. When she showed me the test, 2 pink lines, I cried. I actually cried. I called my mother before I even called my best friend, Marcus. She screamed so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. My father got on the line and said, "Boy, you better take care of that child." I told him I would. I had no idea how true that would turn out to be. The pregnancy was smooth. Michelle glowed. She was one of those women who somehow looks more beautiful pregnant. I would come home from work and find her sitting by the window reading, her hand resting on her stomach, and I would just stand in the doorway and feel full, complete. Our son was born on a Wednesday in March. We named him Elijah. He had my eyes, or so I thought. He had Michelle's nose. He had 10 perfect fingers and 10 perfect toes, and when they put him in my arms for the first time, I made him a promise. I told him I would never let anything hurt him. I told him I would always be there. I didn't know then that the thing that would ultimately hurt him most was already in that hospital room with us, smiling, holding flowers. The first few years were everything I dreamed fatherhood would be. Elijah was a bright kid, curious about everything. He wanted to know why the sky was blue, why dogs couldn't talk, why Grandma's house smelled different from ours. I loved every question. I would stay up researching answers just so I could explain them properly at breakfast. Michelle and I fell into a rhythm. She worked part-time at a design firm. I managed a logistics company. We had a house with a yard. We had a dog named Chester. We had a life that from the outside looked exactly right. Elijah started school. He made friends. He joined a Little League team. I coached every Saturday morning for 3 years. Rain, shine, cold, didn't matter. I was there. I was always there. But I need to tell you something about those years because it matters for what comes later. I need to tell you about the cracks. The cracks were small at first, easy to rationalize. Michelle started working late, more often than made sense. I asked about it once, and she told me they had a big client. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? She got a new phone, password protected. When I mentioned it, casually, not accusatory, she said her old one had broken. I let it go. There was a weekend trip she took with a friend named Renee. I'd never heard of Renee before. I asked to meet her once. Michelle said she was private, didn't like being introduced around. I told myself that was fair. Some people are like that. I told myself a lot of things. The truth is, I think some part of me knew, that deep animal part of a person that registers danger before the brain catches up. I felt something. I just refused to look at it directly,
because looking at it directly would mean my whole life was a lie, and I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. It was Elijah's 10th birthday party. We had 12 kids in the backyard, a bouncy house, a cake shaped like a soccer field, normal chaos, beautiful chaos. And then my mother pulled me aside. She said, "Daniel, I need to ask you something, and I need you not to get upset." I remember laughing. I said, "Mom, this is a birthday party. What could you possibly need to ask me right now?" She looked at Elijah across the yard. He was mid-run, chasing one of his friends, laughing that big, wide laugh of his. And she said very quietly, "Does he look like anyone to you?" I said, "What do you mean? He looks like us." She didn't say anything else. She just looked at me and walked away. That night, after the party, after Elijah was in bed, after Michelle fell asleep, I sat in the living room with the lights off and I stared at nothing. And for the first time in my years, I let myself really look at the thing I'd been avoiding for years. I want to be clear. I didn't go looking for evidence to destroy my family. I went looking for evidence to save it, to confirm what I believed, to prove to my own mother and the growing voice in my head that she was wrong. I started with the basics. I went back through old photos. Elijah at 1, at 3, at 5. I put them next to photos of myself at the same ages. I put them next to Michelle's father, her brother. It was a long night. Then I did something I'm not proud of. I went through Michelle's old emails on a shared account she had forgotten about. 3 years of messages. And buried in there, in a thread from around the time Elijah would have been conceived, was a name. A man named Victor. The emails weren't explicit, but they were intimate. The kind of intimate that means something specific. The kind of familiar that two people only get after being alone together many times. And one email, dated 4 weeks before our wedding anniversary that year, said simply, "I can't keep doing this. He's gonna find out. I need to end it." Victor's reply, "You don't have to do anything. Just remember what we have. I'll wait for you." I closed the laptop and sat on the bathroom floor for 45 minutes. Then I did what any man in my position would eventually do. I ordered a DNA test. Here is something nobody tells you about waiting for a DNA test result. It changes how you see everything. I looked at Elijah differently, not coldly. I want to be clear about that. I still felt every ounce of love I'd ever felt for him. He was still my son in every way that mattered to me in my heart. But I looked at his face differently. I studied it, looking for me, looking for the absence of me. I looked at Michelle differently too. We ate dinner together every night that week. She laughed at her phone once, put it face down quickly. I saw it. I said nothing. I was very good at saying nothing then. The test took 9 days to come back. I used a hair sample from Elijah's brush. I sent a cheek swab of my own. I paid for the expedited service. I used a P.O. box. On the 9th morning, I drove to the post office before work. I sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes before going inside. I retrieved the envelope. I sat back in my car. I held it for a long time. Then I opened it. Elijah was not my biological son. I drove to a parking structure downtown. I went to the top level. I sat there for 3 hours. I watched the city below me. People going to work, living their lives, not knowing. I didn't cry. I couldn't. It was like the part of me that knew how to feel had just switched off. All I could think was, now what? Over the next 3 weeks, I reconstructed everything. Victor, I discovered through careful research, was a man Michelle had worked with at a firm 5 years before we met. They had dated briefly. She had told me about him early in our relationship, casually, the way you mention someone from the past. She said it ended mutually. She said there were no hard feelings. What she did not say was that it never really ended. Based on the email timestamps, the relationship had continued through most of our engagement. The last email dated 3 months before Elijah was born. The timeline, as best I could calculate it, placed the conception during a 2-week period when Michelle had attended a conference in Atlanta and I had stayed home, a conference I had offered to join her on. She said she preferred to go alone. She said she needed professional space. I respected that. I had been proud of myself for respecting that. There are no words for what it feels like to realize that your decency was the weapon used against you. She had not made a mistake. She had not stumbled into a moment of weakness. She had maintained a calculated, sustained deception for over a decade. She looked me in the eye every morning for 12 years and chose every morning to say nothing. That was the part I couldn't get past. Not the affair, not even Elijah. The choice, made over and over and over, every day, while I coached Little League, while I paid the mortgage, while I sat by his bed when he had fever. She chose this. Every day she chose this. While I coached Little League, while I paid the mortgage, while I sat by his bed when he had fever.